Okay, response to trick. I'm just going to read your comments and respond. So you say, so just to clarify what you're suggesting, if the government said right now that all taxes will be removed, and in parentheses, instantaneously business and individuals no longer had to pay taxes at all, and that people should use the extra money that they will be getting anywhere they want, that such wouldn't be a problem. That the society that you live in wouldn't fall apart, and in fact it would be better. Is this a correct assessment of your position? No. What I'm saying, what I've said from the beginning, is that taxation is theft. So if you got a society built upon taxation, I'm not saying that if you just all of a sudden, well, I mean, the government's not going to say, no, stop giving us money. You know, they're not going to do that. Now, the people, if the majority of people decided all of a sudden they're not going to pay taxes, that'd be a big problem, wouldn't it? Everybody in government would be without a job, and they can't go after majority of people and put them in jail, can they? See, it's the government, which is just a group of people. I mean, they use this "we the people" thing like it's the actual common person creating the government, when it's not. In fact, Arizona, one of the key people in the writing of the Constitution and the first governor of Arizona was a businessman. I mean, what better business than taxing everybody, right? Can't beat that, can you? No, I'm saying a house that was, you know, basically built of cards is gonna, it probably would be pretty messed up if you all of a sudden just took the cards away. I'm saying taxes from the beginning were always wrong, and that, you know, and as far as being better, I mean, a no tax society would be more rational. If that's what you mean by better, then yes, it'd be more rational. But would it solve problems? Probably not. I'm saying the problem is taxes. They should have never started. And now you're saying business and individuals no longer had to pay taxes. I mean, taxing business is silly. I mean, I in my comments to Contro Phil, taxing a business, businesses don't pay taxes. Taxes just go in the debits column, right? I mean, the business is out to make a profit. That's why people like Stefan are bitching about taxes, especially the changing of the taxes. Because that's what businesses, whatever taxes there are, they go in the debits column because they have to make a profit. I mean, if the taxes were so much that, I mean, where else could the taxes go but in the debits column? All right, they put the taxes in the debits, and then they got the credits. You know, there has to be a profit there somewhere. Now, if they raise taxes, they have to raise the price. Basically, they have to raise the price of their goods, right? So, any taxes a business pays, the consumer pays. Consumers basically pay all taxes. Businesses don't pay taxes, and you know, taxes flow through the business, but the taxes are essentially paid by the consumer and individuals. Like in that, the one example I think that should be fairly simple to understand is property taxes. Property taxes, this is the example I used in my response to Contro Phil, is that I, the working property owner, have to pay property taxes, but the capitalist who rents his property doesn't have to pay that tax. It's the renter paying the tax. So like I say, it all goes to the consumers pay all taxes. The capitalists don't really pay taxes. It's just another line in the debits column. Anyhow, going on, you ask that I prove that such would be worse after I assert it would be, but I think historically the burden is shifted to you that a no-tax society would be better. Well, I mean, taxes have been around for millennia. How can I point to a no-tax society when a no-tax society would have to go from a tax society to a no-tax society? That's, you know, it's built upon a house of cards, then you can't really look at a no-tax society and say, oh, look, it failed, because before that was a tax society. And I think, I don't know if, I thought it was either this one or the one in Mendham. There was an anarchist region in Spain during the Spanish Revolution in 1939, I believe it was. But that society was smashed by the bigger, stronger state next to it, because we can't have a better way. People in power want to keep their power. So I mean, yeah, it's going from a tax society to a no taxes. You can't judge that no tax society like it was originally a no tax society. Anyhow, you go on. I don't know of any successful free market society, even small ones, that try such as with Galt's Gulch in Chile have failed miserably. Well, again, they went from a tax society to a free market. I mean, there's old money out there, right? The old money wants to hang on to its old money, and that old money is based on taxes, slavery even. Anyhow, you go on. Yet in places such as Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, and it's funny you should mention Sweden and Denmark, because that's where my great-grandparents are from, right? If they had just stayed in Sweden and Denmark, I wouldn't be here. So, the whole cause and effect thing again. Why did they leave Sweden and Denmark? Were they religious nut jobs? Or did they want more freedom in the United States, or what? I mean, anyhow, where taxes go up as much as 60% or more, they are considered some of the most successful societies with the happiest people. Well, whatever, I mean, the happiest people. Yeah, they're happy. Well, all this misery is going on, so happiest would be the most delusional people. Anyhow, going on. It's interesting about the thought experiment that you suggest that someone probably owns the box. For example, the pilot. We can even change the thought experiment to the pilot actually owning the box of food, and in parentheses, in the sense that they worked for it, not in any real, quote, ownership, unquote, sense, which loses all import once we recognize that free will doesn't exist. Let's see, I don't see how you get from free will not existing to we can't own things. I mean, we still experience, right? We are the experiencers. We're not doing anything but experiencing. We experience labor or leisure. And if anyone is going to labor, the fruits of their labor should be theirs. But what you're saying is the fruits of one's labor belongs to somebody else. Somebody else has a right to someone else's labor. That's where it's fundamentally flawed. And the pilot didn't want to share the food. Well, you're assuming the pilot wouldn't want to share the food. If I was a pilot, I would share the food. As a matter of fact, if I was the pilot, I'd feel responsible for them being in the situation they're in. So I'd probably, eat less so that they could have more, because I'm responsible for them being in the situation. I'm the pilot, right? Shouldn't have let that happen. I shouldn't have crashed the damn plane, even though it wasn't really my fault. It was still, I'm the pilot. It runs into the very same problem. Again, you're assuming the pilot's a dick. See, I'm assuming a rational society with rational people. Yes, in a society with irrational people, the irrational get in power. See, that's the problem. What if the irrational are the ones in power? Which apparently is, especially in the United States, that's what's happened. So now the pilot, A, worked for the food, and B, was just bringing it to his second home during the flight. Per your thinking, the rest of the people on the plane would be stealing the food. Well, yeah, if the pilot was a dick, of course, if you're starving to death, these situations are different. All right? I mean, if you're starving to death, yeah, technically you're stealing the food, but you're starving to death. So it's not like you're just out there stealing because you wrote a document that says that you can steal. Anyhow, But this goes back to the very idea of you thinking working for X means ownership of X. Exactly. The fruits of my labor should be mine and yours. Fruits of your labor should be yours. That's all we got. That's it. That's all we can do. That's the only way we can, determine who owns what. Fruits of one labor is theirs. You say this is our biggest disagreement. I guess so, but I mean, I'm not hearing anything that says I should work for somebody else. Somebody else deserves the fruits of my labor. Where's the ethics in that? That someone else deserves the fruits of my labor. Anyhow, you are suggesting that the 5 working for the food makes them more owning of the food than the 5 jerks who found it and took ownership over it. Well, yeah. I mean, somebody owns the food. I mean, they find a box of food. Hey, whose box of food is this? If nobody says anything, well, hey, we're kind of stranded here for a while. Let's say we split the food evenly. That would be the rational thing to do. Not say the 5 people out. We found it. Finders keepers. Anyhow, in the scenario that false sense of ownership needs to rationally go to the wayside in both cases for an equal rationed distribution. Well, again, and the situation is an emergency. It's not like everyday life. But again, equal ration distribution is fine, but forcing someone else to give up the fruits of their labor is wrong. I just can't. You need to tell me something to make it ethical for someone else to take the fruits of someone else's labor, just to take it. Especially if they're not starving. If they're starving, I mean, people should cut people a break if they're starving, but anyhow, just the fundamental rational ethics of the situation. The fruits of one's labor should be theirs. Anyhow, going on, it's this very notion of ownership that, on a rational level, needs to be abandoned once we have a situation where one owns more than another, especially someone who doesn't even have basic necessities. Well, again, just because someone has more than another doesn't mean the other has a right to just take someone else's. I mean, if you don't have the basic necessities, then that's a problem, but it doesn't give them the right to take. I mean, if they're starving, society should probably cut them a little slack. But the state is just taking because they say they have a right to take. Anyhow, you got a link to an article here. Is that your article or excerpt from your book? Anyhow, let's go over that one. The article, it's a blog post, I guess. Deserve justifies inequality. I don't know should I read it all or I don't know. Let's see. We'll see right here. What are the reasons one might justify their own well-being at the expense of another? See, I'm not saying how is keeping the fruits of my labor at the expense of another. At the expense of another is taking from somebody else. Taking the fruits of somebody else is at the expense of another. So, I mean, anyhow, I'll go on. From what I can tell, most, if not all, entitlement of well-being over another's lesser well-being depends on if a person deserves their better well-being over the other or if the other deserves their lesser well-being. It's the idea that one is more or less deserving than another that allows most, if not all, justifications of inequality to take place. I don't know. I'm not trying to justify inequality. I'm just saying the fruits of my labor and your labor, anybody's labor, should be theirs. That's all I'm saying. But what happens once this notion of deserved is removed? In other words, once we recognize that a person could not have, of their own accord, done differently, and it follows that the notion of being more deserving than another itself has no justification. I'm not saying that I'm more deserving than another. So you're making an argument that I'm not making. Let's go down to you got another thought experiment here. When you're talking about egocentricity, I mean, you can't help that. I mean, we're forced into a world where we have needs. We have to satisfy needs or we die. So you can't escape the ego. It's just it reduces, I mean, reducing or you can't obliterate egocentricity. You can recognize that it's just a bunch of bullshit, but you still have to eat, or you die. Anyhow, let me just go to the thought experiment because I don't want to read the whole article here. Okay, if we were to reduce the world down to 10 conscious identical clones that live on green goop, and 2 clones had all the goop, had comfortable homes, had robots taking care of their health, had excess of everything, and were using most of the resources on the planet, while the others had nothing and were barely surviving their sad existence. As soon as it's recognized that those 2 clones are not more entitled to the good life than the other 8, an equal distribution becomes the only reasonable solution. How did this situation occur? Was there taxation going on? Or was this a tax-free zone? Somehow in a tax-free zone, 2 clones got all the stuff? You'd have a hard time proving that. But anyhow, let's say, I mean, again, it's not a cut and dry thought experiment. Let's say we had, 10 conscious identical clones, and 5 of the clones. Can these clones reproduce? Because almost everything, I argue, can relate to antinatalism, including anarchy, including taxation and stuff. If these clones can reproduce, let's say 5 of them reproduce, they have 2 more clones. And so these 5 with their 2 offspring are now screaming inequality, when they're responsible for the inequality. They created more people, more clones. Now they're screaming about inequality. That's a big problem in this world. The people keep reproducing, even though the situation's out of control, and then they scream bloody murder about inequality. Like with the property tax. I mean, people are having kids are basically saying they have their kids, that everybody has to pay for their kids' education, that their kids are more deserving than other people, right? I mean, that should be a simple example of how taxation is wrong. At least that one, and they're all basically the same thing. It's just taking from someone and giving it to somebody else. Especially in this case, people make kids who can't afford the kids, knowing that society, other people, will pay for their kids' schooling. I mean, right? You got to agree with that. So, I mean, yeah, that's the underlying problem. People just keep making more people and then scream inequality. Well, except for the rich, but yeah, the rich, they make kids too. I'm right now thinking of Mitt Romney. He's got 5 boys, so he's saying, he's rich. His 5 boys are going to have a good life, but apparently he has enough excess to create 5 kids. But if he can do that, why couldn't he help other people's kids? Of course, other people's kids shouldn't have been brought into existence either. Anyhow, yeah, all this. This is kind of a side issue, really. But it may be I mean, it's the fundamental flaw in society. People got the notion in their heads that they can knock out babies and somebody else will pay for their education. You know? I mean, I had a kid, right? Way back when, and I just accepted that's the way things were done. School is free, so why not have a kid? But if the situation was you had to pay for your kid's school, that would have been a cause that might have led my brain to think, hey, maybe having kids is not such a good idea since I can't afford them. Of course, I was in the Army when I had them, so I was okay. But even then, you know, could I, if I had to pay for my kid's education, would I have been making enough in the Army to pay for my kid's education? Then again, the state says your kid must go to school. Why does the kid have to go to school? I mean, reading, writing, and arithmetic, those things should be able to be taught by a parent. If a parent can't teach their kids how to read and write and do arithmetic, we for sure should be having kids. Anyhow. And you got a link to a TEDx talk about the freedom to do what one wants and not have to worry about survival. Well, you always got to worry about survival. I don't know. Creativity and productivity. I mean, it's all just a load of crap. I mean, let's talk about civilization. I mean, if it wasn't for civilization, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have to worry about all this crap. I mean, that's the bottom line. Like I said, you mentioned Sweden and Denmark, where my great-grandparents came from. If they just stayed in Sweden and Denmark, I wouldn't be here. That's for damn sure. There's no freaking way I would be here. Anyhow, you end by saying, anyway, thanks for the vid. I have a feeling we're at an impasse here. Well, that's dangerous territory. That's what Thunderfoot said to Gary when he called in the Magic Sandwich Show. I mean, Gary was just making the argument, you know, when he's calmly and rationally about antinatalism. It was Mother's Day, in fact. It was kind of funny. But I don't know. They went on. They were going back and forth. I don't know, about an hour maybe. And then Thunderfoot says, "Well, I think we're at an impasse here." Yeah. What? Come on, give me a break. An impasse, really? I mean, what is that saying? Are you saying I'm stupid? What? I mean, that's, you know. Yeah. You can't say that. We're at an impasse. You got to give your opponent the benefit of the doubt. I mean, maybe one of us is right, and we're just not saying the right things to make the other one concur with what the other one's saying. Anyhow, you're saying why? As I'm not going to convince you that this ownership idea is faulty for as long as you equate working for X with real ownership of X. Well, I mean, again, you're saying that somebody else that didn't work for X has the right to a portion of my work for X. So, well, how come the burden of proof's on me? It should really be on you. Why does the state have a right to a piece of my labor? I mean, like I say, with taxes, the money could be going. Probably taxes just go to pay the debt now, right? I mean, the United States is so far in debt, or do they just pay part of the debt and the rest of it goes to whatever? But even so, I mean, they spent $2 trillion on the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, which is a complete waste of money. I mean, even more so. I mean, now we got ISIS to deal with, which is our creation. If we hadn't been dicking around in the Middle East, there would be no ISIS right now. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's all for now. Well, actually, I think there's some more comments of yours I got here. Let's see. Oh, maybe not. That's good enough. Thanks.